We've got an exciting show lined up for you, and I'm delighted to introduce our very special guest, Miss Kim Olver. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Donna Marie.
Great to have you here. A little bit of background on Kim. She is a national certified counselor, a licensed clinical professional counselor, and an internationally acclaimed transformational leader. She's inspired people around the globe to apply the principles of inside out empowerment, and we'll get more on that later. She's trained thousands of people in reality therapy and choice theory. Her work is to work on the unconscious sabotage that we often do when we get closest to our dreams. And she's the author of a great book, The Secret of Happy Couples. Kim, I'm so glad you're able to join us.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Donna Marie.
Fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about your work in the relationship cycle and the way people move through different stages? I think that would be really helpful for us.
Sure. Well, most people start in the alone phase. Now, that's not everybody. I know there are people who never take the time to be alone. But I recommend that in order to have a really successful relationship, you want to take the time to kind of take inventory and to learn the lessons that you were meant to learn from your last relationship. So the alone stage takes some time to regroup. And then you'll move into the getting together phase, which is where you find other people, you open yourself up again to the possibility of relationships, and you have to find where you need to go to find people that you might be compatible with. So then you start to date and you start to, maybe you find someone that you're thinking you might be compatible with. So you move into what I call the compatibility stage. And this is where you're asking, I recommend anyway, asking the difficult questions that couples need to ask to determine whether or not they have the compatibility to go the long haul. So in other words, that you might ask, well, how many do you want to have children? Yes, I want to have children. How many would you like to have? Well, I'd like to have two. And the other person might say, well, I'd like to have three. So you figure you can work that out. But we don't really ask the difficult questions, such as, what kind of discipline do you believe in? These are the touchy areas that we're afraid to approach because we think it might turn off our potential partner. But in the compatibility stage, we really need to ask those difficult questions to determine whether or not this is someone we really want to go um, take take the next step to commitment with. Once you're in a committed relationship, the next stage is the maintenance stage. And I think this is one of the most neglected stages. So often people think the end result of relationship is I've got the guy, I've got the girl, now I can put my feet up and coast. But that couldn't be further from the truth. We need to really work at
Mm.
maintaining positive relationships. So we have to do the things that will maintain and enhance those relationships. And then, as much as I hate to remind people of it, unless we both die at precisely the same moment, you're going to find yourself in the alone phase again. And then, how do you navigate through the grief and the loss of your most significant relationship of choice? So you're back again to the alone phase, and that's the relationship cycle.
That's very interesting. I encounter many people who want to short circuit that alone stage in the beginning. What are the risks of really not taking the time to be alone?
Well, one of the biggest risks is that you never really learn the lessons that you're supposed to learn, so you keep repeating them. You'll
Mm.
keep drawing into your life the same person. They may have a different name, may be from a different state, but it'll be the same issues, the same problems that keep recurring because you haven't really taken the time to figure out what went wrong, what did you do to contribute to the problem, and what you might do differently in your next relationship. It's also
Great.
very unfair to the people that you get involved with. That's the other risk. It's really not fair to them.
Right. You're not quite ready, so you're not
No,
presenting yourself as a whole person. So, yeah,
right.
that's important. I also liked your issues about the compatibility. Are we reluctant to ask those difficult questions out of fear of damaging an emerging relationship, or what's holding us back?
Yeah, I think it's fear. I think we're afraid that if we find out that we disagree on an important issue that the other person may leave. And actually, you either need to work through those difficult questions and come to some agreement about them,
Mm.
or it is a good idea to separate and leave and start over again with someone that you may be more compatible with.
It only gets harder, right? As
Absolutely
you
right.
get closer and closer, then you can never break. Yeah. So, what did you consider destructive and healthy relationship habits? What are the differences, and can you contrast that with an example or two?
Sure. And this is a real at the heart, I think, of a lot of relationship difficulties. And it comes down to people trying to change their partner and make their partner be different. And so we'll use behaviors designed to get the other person to change. And they're not very nice behaviors. They're not things that help strengthen the relationship. So there's way more than seven, but I'm going to mention seven. If we could just reduce our use of these seven, we'd take giant leaps forward in our relationships. So the first one is complaining. We complain about our partners behind their backs to their face, and it's demoralizing, and it doesn't really build any strength in the relationship. So we have complaining, we have blaming, criticizing, and I often have people ask, well, what about constructive criticism? To which I reply, I believe constructive criticism is actually an oxymoron. I've never been criticized and felt constructed afterwards. I don't know about you. Um, and then there's nagging. And, I happen to be quite accomplished in this area. My mother taught me well. But once you've said what you want about three times, you can assume the person's heard you and they're not likely to do it or do it at the time you want. Saying it another 3,000 times doesn't really get the job done. Then there's threatening. And of course, if you make a threat, then you have to be willing to follow through with punishment. And I find there's a difference between men and women in how we punish in relationships. And of course, there's exceptions, but women tend to withdraw affection or intimacy, and men tend to withdraw attention. We know what the other person wants the most, and
Mhm. Yeah.
we're not reluctant to use those weapons. And then the other thing is rewarding or bribing to control. So dangling that carrot and saying, "Oh, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you." Um, Sometimes people think that that's okay because the other person is getting something that they want, but nobody likes to be controlled like that. And they may engage in the behavior to get the reward, but they're usually pretty resentful about it. And it doesn't, once again, doesn't build relationships. Those habits chip away at the foundation of our relationship. So I try to teach people instead to use what's called the healthy relationship habits. And the first one is listening. And I'm not just talking about hearing the other person, I'm talking about listening for understanding. So we're trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes, in their skin, looking at the world through their eyes to try to understand how they see it the way they do. You don't have to agree with them, but you're just trying your best to understand where they're coming from. Then we have supporting. And I always say it's easy to support someone when they're doing what you want them to do. Not so easy when they're doing something that may be challenging for you. So, supporting is an important behavior. Encouraging is another one, a little different from support because encouraging is um, it's about being your partner's cheerleader. They may not have the skills or the confidence to try something that's important to them. So you encourage them to go out and learn or do the things that they need to accomplish the goals that they want in their life. So we talked about encouraging. The next one I talk about is trusting. We have to trust our partners that they're doing their best in the relationship, and if they do hurt us, um, it's not an intentional behavior on their part. Then I talk about respecting, and I really spend some time on this because we've been taught to use the golden rule in the area of respect and do unto others the way we would want them to do unto us. But that really doesn't work. Men and women have different ideas about what respect looks like. For example, if I'm upset about something as a female, I need to talk about it and I need to vent and I need to do it more than once. And if I do that with with my guy, he wants to do one of two things. He wants to disappear and leave me alone, give me my space, or he wants to fix the problem and I'm
Yeah,
not looking for solutions.
right.
If he's going to really respect me, he needs to sit and listen while I vent. Similarly, when he's upset and he needs his space, it's not respectful for me to chase after him and say, "Oh, baby, what's wrong? Tell me what the problem is," which is what women tend to do. So we really need to pay attention to what our partners want in the area of respect. So I've kind of borrowed the platinum rule, where from the business world that says, "Do unto others as they would have you do unto them," instead of the golden rules. So you have to take the time to find out what your partner wants and then give them what they want, not what you would want in a similar situation. So that's respecting. And then we get to accepting. And if you know the serenity prayer, it's called the serenity prayer for a reason. When you get to really accept your partner as who they are and stop trying to change them, you will feel a peace about your relationship that you don't have when you're trying to change them. So I do a little variation on the serenity prayer, and it goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know that person is me. And when we do that in relationships, it makes everything so much better. Um, and then the last one is, instead of the rewarding to control, I talk about negotiating differences. And when you negotiate differences, you're really trying to come to a conclusion or solution that both of you are happy with. So that's the difference in
I,
caring or healthy versus destructive
yeah.
relationship habits.
Well, I think in the last 10 minutes, you've given us a whole lifetime worth of relationship advice that every one of us can use. I was especially intrigued about the respecting and in even sweeping generalizations about what women want or what men want.
Right.
It even could be different in different people. So taking the
Absolutely.
time to figure out what your mate is looking for will just pay back in really big dividends. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Do any of these habits interrelate to each other or build upon each other? Can we do part of them and not all, or how does that work?
Well, I think all of the destructive relationship habits are destructive. So our goal is to try to reduce the use of them. The thing is, though, when we try to stop doing something, it doesn't usually work very well. It's like asking someone to stop thinking about pink elephants. What are you thinking about? Pink elephants. So we want to replace them with the caring or the healthy relationship habits. And I think the easiest one to start with is listening, because all the others really build on listening. So if you're trying to decrease the use of your destructive ones and instead replace it with the habit of listening, you can build the rest of them from there.
Oh, that's great insight. The other one that I really struck upon was the accepting. Many times we go about trying to mold our partner into ourselves or our ideal of what a partner should be, when that's not them. We pick them because we like them, and then our first objective is to change them. So the accepting, it seems like it's a mature and open, aware habit that we can instill in our relationships to really smooth over some of the rough roads.
Absolutely. In fact, it was one of the four commonalities I found among happy couples was an acceptance of their partner. So I think you're right. It really is hugely important for relationships.
Yeah. The Serenity Pair modified is really, really quite intriguing as well, where the person that we can change is ourselves and our choices and our actions. So you're really bringing up our emotional intelligence with
Hmm.
your destructive and constructive habits and relationships. So I think that's a really good insight for us.